Welcome to episode 11 of Talking Prisoner. We have a very special guest with us today. She played one of Prisoner's most iconic top dogs for 376 episodes. But
What do you mean one of?
Sorry?
What do you mean one of?
What do you mean one of?
Hi, Val.
The most iconic, sorry.
It's more like it.
All right, sorry. We'll start again.
No, keep going.
Huh? No.
Keep going.
I'll start again.
Leave it in.
Leave it in.
She played Prisoner's most iconic top dog, but not only was she on Prisoner, she appeared on Homicide, The Flying Doctors, Blue Heelers, Something in the Air, Neighbours, City Homicide, Charlie and Boots. And in 2016, she braved the jungle in I'm Celebrity, Get Me Out of Here. She's had dinner with Michael Parkinson and was also interviewed by him. She's won 3 Logies, one for Best Lead Actress in a Series, Most Popular Actress in 1982, and Best Lead Actress in 1983. She played top dog Bea Smith, but known to all of us as Queen Bea. Welcome to Talking Prisoner.
Thank you very much. That's quite an introduction.
Yes, I liked it. Val, can you tell us where you grew up and a little bit about?
Yeah, I was born in Perth. And of course, I was born during the Second World War, 1943 to be precise. And my father was in the Navy. And so he actually never even saw me until he was on leave when I was nearly 2 years old. And so my mother didn't have me christened until then. And the dean at the cathedral was very cross about that and said, why wasn't that child brought to me before? She said, because her father was away. And the dean said to my father, the father is only necessary for the conception. Anyway, and so he wasn't actually ever at home sort of permanently until I was about 6 years old. Wow. So it was just sort of me and my mother and my grandfather, because my grandmother died when I was only 18 months old. And my grandfather and my grandmother were both English, because my grandfather had come to Australia and come to Perth, Western Australia, to work for the railways with his brother when he was about 18. And the First World War broke out. And so he and his brother signed up immediately, and they were first. His brother was first wave and he was second wave Gallipoli, and they both survived. Wow, and they went straight from, and in fact, my grandfather was one of the last people to leave Gallipoli, because he was used to the explosives on the railway. So he was the one running along setting up the explosives that made the Turks think that they were still there. Oh. And then he went straight from there to Normandy, to Vinacourt, which I don't know if you were aware of. There was a big book came out of the Australian diggers, the photographs that were taken in Vinacourt by a French couple. And on La Maison des Australiennes, because they say in Vinacourt that the Australians saved all that part of Normandy, and they're quite right, they did. There, in front of the La Maison des Australiennes, there is a huge, about 9 foot tall banner with a photograph of my grandfather.
Oh, really?
He had made friends with them, and he was sort of their poster boy. When they made the television series about it, or the television episode about it, not a whole series, and television show, I didn't know anything about it. My cousin rang me and said, Granddad's photographs all over Channel 7. I went, oh, goodness me, I had a look at it. And my daughter rang him and said, have you any idea whose grandfather's photograph you were spreading all over the place? That's Val Lehman's grandfather. And they checked it all out, and it very definitely was. And they said, and Cassie said, and his, not him, because he was dead by then, his twins are both turning 80 next week. Wow. And so they said, oh gosh, can we come to the birthday party? Which they did. And they gave both my uncle and my mother, twins, a framed photograph. But unfortunately, that particular or the negative of that particular photo has gone missing. They can't find it, which is why it's not in the War Memorial in Canberra. Incidentally, all those photographs were offered. I'm giving away all the stuff from my book that were offered to the Australian War Memorial. No, they were offered to the Australian government, and the government turned them down. So Terry Packer, the Western Australian millionaire, the one that married Peter Tupano. The one that married Peter Tupano?
No.
He bought them. He bought them himself, and he donated them to the War Memorial. And I've been up there and chatted to them about it. So there today, to this day, there is this huge photograph of my grandfather in France. But he, of course, all those British boys were given huge land grants in Australia, which he took up, and his was in Wickepin. And would you believe it was directly opposite Bert Facey's? You know who Bert Facey was?
Yes, yes.
And I played Bert Facey's mother in the television miniseries they made of A Fortunate Life. Isn't that weird?
Yes. I actually went to the publishers, which was Penguin here, and they told me the story about Bert Facey and the fact that it was all written on brown paper. A Fortunate Life was submitted. You know, just an amazing story.
Yeah, and it was I think it was his mother who taught him to write quite old, when he was much older. Yeah, not a very young child.
Wow, great story. What were you like in school? Tell us about it.
What was I like at school?
Yeah.
My first school was a very, very posh girls' school in Perth called St Hilda's. But I was only there until I was about 8. Yes, 8, when my father was home from the war, and he decided that we were going to move back to Victoria, where his family was. He was actually born in Sydney, but his family had all moved to Melbourne to help out his brothers with the trucks. Because my father was an automotive mechanic and all that sort of thing, and a fitter and turner, and he ran all the guns on the ships anyway when he was in the Navy, and that's unfortunately what killed him too, because they were all wrapped in asbestos, and that's what got him eventually, very sadly. So we moved to Victoria, where I was briefly sent to a state school. Until my parents could settle down and have another look for another school for me. And I was there for about 1.5 years. And then I was sent to a girls' school called Wesley College. Not Wesley, the boys' one, but Westley College, which was actually in Northcote. Wow. And it was a very small school. I had from kindergarten to matric, it was about 160 students, I think. Very small indeed. And I was the school vet. Also, by the time I left, I was also the sports captain. And at the age of 11, I'd won the Herald Art Youth competition that they used to hold every year. And I was 11 years old. And sad thing about that is I went home and said to my mother, guess what, I've won the Herald Art Youth Art competition. She said, that's nice, dear. How are your maths? That was my mother all over. Never praise one's own ever, which is why I'm an attention-seeking monster. That's the reason.
Was it a strict upbringing?
Well, it would have been if they'd been there very much, because both my mother and my father worked, which means that after school, I was supposed to come straight home from school, but I never did. You know, I sort of wandered about all over the place. I had a very, very cunning method. What I used to do was, if my mother managed to get home before me, I'd climb up the side of the house, push the window open, throw my hat and my bag and my blazer in, and then walk around the back gate up into the house as if I'd, been home and gone out again. And on one occasion I was doing that. I did it a lot. I pushed up the window and there was my mother standing there looking out of the window. I was caught. But I was an only child, you see, and I was not only an only child, I was on my own so much of the time. But I was very fortunate that we had, I had a courtesy aunt that lived around the corner from us who had more than 100 dachshunds. And she had twin daughters very much older than me, not quite as old as my mother though. And they led me to read a lot of stuff that my mother was very good about giving me things to read, and she used to read to me as a child. And of course at school I read very well indeed, which is why whenever we did Shakespeare, I was always given the lead to read. I even got into trouble there because when we were doing when we were doing Julius Caesar, I'd already read it before we got into class. The minute I got them, I would read them. And they said, and Valerie, you'll read Mark Antony. And I said, no, I don't want to read Mark Antony. I want to read Brutus. No, Mark Antony has all the poetry. Mark Antony is the better role. I mean, I think I was about 11 years old. And I said, I don't think so. I think Brutus is the most interesting character. And to this day, I still do, because that's the man that had all the conflict. But that was my attitude. And because it was a strict school, but I practically ran it. I was the school vet. If animals came into the school, I was the only student that was allowed to get on the roof to get the tennis balls and the spatulas. What do you call it?
Shuttlecocks.
Shuttlecocks. That's the word I want. Get the shuttlecocks off the roof. Yeah, ran the place. It doesn't exist anymore. It was run by 3 English old maids.
Okay. Wow.
But I mean, you know, it was a damn good education. I learned French from the age of 8, and actually that school taught it from kindergarten. And although I left school after leaving, I had a letter from my teacher saying, because I was the only student who had managed to pass intermediate, I was the only student doing leaving. So I did all my classes with the matric girls. So she said, I regard this child as educated to matriculation standard. I liked school. Apart from maths, I enjoyed the things I learned. Yeah. But I was naughty. I remember
Really?
I was cheeky. We were doing geography on one occasion, and they were talking about the fishing in the North Sea, and the teacher said, "Oh, now I can't think of the name of the damn fish." Fishing for, anyway, I can't remember the term of it. It's that annoying. And he said, does anyone know what this is? And I said, yes, it's an adult sardine. And she said, rubbish, rubbish, rubbish. It is not. It's no such thing. It's a fishing for, I'll get it in a minute. And I thought, oh, because I'd seen it on a quiz program, heard it on a quiz program on the radio. I knew it was. So I waited for a while and I put my hand up and she said, yes, Miss Willis. What is it? I said, may I be excused? So I went off. I didn't go to the loo. I went down to the library and came back with the encyclopedia. I said, there we are. That fish is an adult, is a miniature, the child, it's an adult sardine. And she actually said, well, we all learn something new, don't we, every now and then. She was quite good. She didn't put me down for it. But that's the kind of kid I was. I was much more interested in spending my time with adults than children, because I thought most children were quite dull. I'm a bit the same. Although now I enjoy, particularly because I've worked an enormous amount with children. I worked in theatre and education for 5 years, and this was before Prisoner. And intelligent children just delight me. I love them.
Yeah, they're great.
Question?
No, I was going to ask, what's a standout childhood memory that you have to this day that just stands out in your mind?
But there's so many.
I know
I
there
mean,
would be.
one that's very, very important to me was at the age of 5. No, sorry, I lie. At the age of, how old was I? No, I was 5. Yes, at the age of 5, I was taken to a series of Italian operas.
Oh, wow.
I think my mother must have known someone because I was sitting on the aisle in E row, and I now know those are house seats. So she must have known somebody. But she would take me to the theatre early and buy a program and read me the synopsis of the opera. And it was all in Italian. And the reason was because it was I was 5, it was 1948, because Australia was about to have an enormous amount of European migrants coming to live after the war. And that was one of the ways of, saying, look at how wonderful the Italians are. You see, the Italian opera company was touring, and I just was entranced by it. And the first opera I saw was Madame Butterfly. And when Cho San made her entrance across that stage, all I wanted to do was get on stage and be a part of that sound and that spectacle. And I couldn't work out how to get across the orchestra pit. Plus, I wasn't sure Mother would have been terribly pleased.
Maybe not. Your first job, what did you do when you left school?
Well, I was forced to leave art school at RMIT, where I had a scholarship, and sadly, because my mother said she couldn't afford for me to go be spending all my time doing reviews and things like that and blah, 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 blah. I mean, my mother left school at 12. And then she did a business degree, not a business degree, went to a business college. And she was super intelligent. Really, really very bright woman, incredibly well read. And she couldn't see the point of more education. She'd managed it. So she said, no, I'm not. And also, well, she'd left my father, that's another story. And so it was just the two of us. And she said, I can't afford to pay for that. So I was forced to leave. I didn't want to leave. I was doing very well at RMIT, doing fine arts. And I loved all the people there. But I said, oh, okay, she was the boss. I had no choice because I had chosen to leave with her. And I looked in the paper to try, we were living in East Melbourne at the time, to try and find, and I, funnily enough, same as Maggie Kirkpatrick, I ended up selling shoes in a shop in Fitzroy Street, not Fitzroy Street, Major Street in Collingwood, I can't remember the name of it, and Victoria Street, Collingwood, yes. And I did that for a while. And I had actually gone down to that was my first job, yes. And it was after that that I went to RMIT, because someone said to me, why aren't you doing art? Because you won all that thing. So I went down and I did a year there. And when I left RMIT, or was forced to leave RMIT, I thought, oh, well, I should do something that's art related. And I went down to the Mutual stores, were advertising for someone for their art department. The Mutual store no longer exists. There used to be 2, 3, I think, big department stores just in Flinders Street once upon a time in Melbourne. And the Mutual store was one of them. And I went down and said, I've come to apply for that job. And they said, can you type? And I said, no. So they sent someone who could type to go and for art lessons. And I thought that was pretty dumb. You need to have talent to be an artist, not to be a typist. So I said, well, what else is available? He said, well, would you like to work in the fine china department as a salesperson? I said, well, I'll give it a go. And actually ended up being quite useful because I learned a great deal about very fine china, which I still enjoy. I now collect very fine china from the 1700s.
Oh, wow.
And my most marvelous memory of that was I was very much the youngest person on the floor in the China department, and the head of the China department came to me one day and said, there's a blind chap here and he's looking to buy a wedding present for his daughter, and he's looking, he has a lot of money and he wants to buy a really, really beautiful dinner service. do you think you could talk to him and describe them for him, please? So I said, yes, certainly. So here I am, all 17 years old, and explaining all about the China department and the various China services to him. And he eventually chose one after I had described it, and I was organising it to have it all wrapped up and what have you, and sent to him. And he said to me, may I ask you a very personal question? I said, yes, what's that? He said, could you please tell me what perfume you're wearing, because I would love to buy it for my wife. And I thought, isn't that wonderful? He can't see me, but he can smell me. Little things, that sort of stick in my mind about early on in my life. Yeah.
So was it when you went to the opera, when your mum took you to the opera, was that when you worked out you wanted to be an actress or perform? Was that when it?
I'm not sure that's when I worked out I wanted to be an actress. I didn't know that it was possible, really. When we moved to Melbourne, I also, everybody went to the movies. Every Friday night, my mother and father and I went to the movies, because I had no brothers and sisters, went to the movies. And on Saturday morning, I went to the matinees. So I would go to the movies twice a week. I was very interested by all the fabulous makeup and what have you. And I'd come home, because my mother didn't have eyeshadows. Nobody did those days. So I'd get the makeup, the base makeup, and I'd grind up my pencils into it to colour it, and make myself eyeshadow and all that sort of thing. Mascara, you couldn't buy mascara, black shoe polish, all kinds of stuff. So all that aspect of it, yes, fascinated me. And I loved the idea. I went to the theatre a great deal because my parents took me. I also won singing prizes at school, which my mother approved of too. And she actually sent me to drama classes very briefly, only very briefly, because they moved from the city to St Kilda. And my mother said, I'm sorry, you can't come home from St Kilda on your own as a 14-year-old in the evening. I won't allow it. So I had to stop going. But I loved the drama classes because I shone immediately. I was aware that I spoke well. They liked the way I spoke. They liked the way I interpreted. I knew I read well. And they taught me how to move as well. So yes, that was the spark. The spark was really, really lit then. And then I did reviews at RMIT, of course, and also I was at RMIT that I met my first husband, because in those days the Duntroon boys, Duntroon didn't give degrees. And so the academic boys used to have to come out of Duntroon and do, I think it was 2 years schooling to get their degrees. And he came and did engineering at RMIT, and that's how I met him. But I actually met him on stage.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, he was in the review as well. He was a very good gymnast. And one of the other boys, and he also in the army, did a thing together, and he actually did a backflip into a piece of something that lashed his eye that should have been taken off stage, and and I ended up cleaning up his eye and what have you, but taking all the stage makeup. I used to do all the stage makeup for everybody too. Being an artist as well and being interested, I was quite good at stage makeup. So yes, that was there too. And then I got married very early. And I had never done a play. I'd never done a straight play. And the first straight play I ever did was at Puckapunyal, at the amateur theatrical company at Puckapunyal. But the funny thing about that was we arrived at Puckapunyal, and I had a small child, Cassie, and her younger sister, who was only about 3 or 4 months old at that time. And we arrived at 5 o'clock on a Saturday afternoon. And at 5 o'clock on Sunday morning, my husband went away for nearly 3 months. Oh. I knew absolutely nobody at all in Puckapunyal. And when he came back, I had written and was producing a review. And I'd cast it, and this chap had turned up audition, and I'd cast him. I thought he was very good, but then he didn't turn up to 2 consecutive rehearsals, so I sacked him. No one told me he was the area commander.
Whoops.
Which is true. I mean, people would say your husband would be sacked for that sort of thing. Not a bit of it. He thought it was terribly funny. I said, you can't be in my show. You didn't come to 2. True, it's all true. I told all those stories when I was actually presenting and comparing an Australian Army band at what was at that time the very, very new concert hall in Melbourne, absolutely new. And I was supposed to go afterwards to the officers' mess, although they said I was invited, but I didn't go because Don Cant was a friend of mine and he was singing. He was the first ever Army singer that they employed. And he's a dear friend of mine. And they said, you didn't come, you know, you embarrassed me terribly. I said, oh, officers' messes mean I spent my life in officers' messes. And he said, but all those people say, all those stories she told, they're all true. You know, they weren't there. I said, yeah, spent my life being a villain.
You told us a little bit about.
Question though.
Told us a little bit about catering. Now tell us about cooking.
Cooking. My mother was a very good cook, a very, very good cook. And that's how I learned about good food and good cooking. And we ate splendidly always, and also interesting dishes. I don't know. I mean, I know that we were eating, my mother was cooking Chinese food way before it was fashionable to do so at home, and difficult, interesting dishes. So early on, I had what was probably a fairly sort of educated palate. I enjoyed interesting, good food. My father's family was always raving about my mother's cooking, and but she wouldn't let me in the kitchen. I wasn't allowed to do anything. I never did anything at home. The only thing I was required to do at home was keep my own room in a state in which I was willing to live in it, which was pretty untidy. Excuse me. So I never washed a dish. I never swept the floor. I was never asked to. And as there's only 3 of us, there wasn't a huge amount of work to do in that area. But I guess that's where my interest in cooking came from, though. And my mother actually said much later in life, was another memorable compliment, was that she thought I was a much better cook than she was. Wow. And I said, no, I don't think I'm a better cook than you, Mother. I have been exposed, because I've lived in more countries than you have. I've just been exposed to more other cuisines. I'm not a better cook than she was. Wow. I love to cook. I don't like to cook so much now. I've sort of like been there, done that. Can't be bothered anymore. But I've got everyone coming here for Christmas, so it'll be the 15-pound turkey. Very, very traditional English Christmas. And I'm already cooking. I haven't done it yet, but I'll start cooking the Christmas cakes very soon, because they have to be watered regularly with. Excuse me, I think there's somebody out there. Wait a minute. Okay.
We could do a little edit there.
Yeah, I've just written it down so I can tell Kim where we need to. Yeah.
Okay, I've let them out. There's somebody just dared to take a dog walking past I couldn't see it, but they could smell it. So I'll come back shortly. I'm terribly sorry for that interruption.
That's okay, we can edit that.
My life circulates around my dogs. They're more important than anybody.
That's okay. Now,
when was I?
In 2019, you did something very special. You auctioned off one of your prized possessions, your Logie, to help wildlife from the devastating bushfires we suffered. Can you tell us a little bit about that and your passion for wildlife?
Well, yeah, I've always been passionate about Australian wildlife. That comes from my mother too. One of the earlier things that I remember as a child was being taken.
Just like my Ben.
Settle down. I locked them out on the. No, there. I remember being taken usually to a Sunday afternoon, generally during the spring, as quite a young child. We'd go out, and my mother and my father and I and my little cousins, and we would. No, it wasn't my father. Of course, my mother and my grandfather and I, and the cousins, and we would go looking. We'd all go out in the country. I had to get out of the car, and there used to be a prize for the first person who could spot an orchid. So I was into prizes. So I had, very good, trying to spot. So I learned to spot orchids very, very quickly. It's interesting, years and years later, I was working for the Children's Theatre, and we were up in Dimboola, which is, of course, right on the edge of the little desert. And the director, who was actually a New Zealander, came up to visit us. And I said, come and have a quick tour, because it was spring, it was September, and it's a really beautiful area, and the wildflowers are lovely. And I put him in the Children's Arena Theatre van and drove him out to the edge of the little desert. We're driving on. I said, oh, look, stop, get out the car with me. Walked in about sort of 10, 15 feet and said, look, now there's a spotted orchid, and there's a greenwood. And he said to me, how the hell can you see those when you're driving in a van? I went, they break the scenery, they break. I know where that, I can tell. I recognize them. Never thought about it. I could see them. Yeah, I used to love the fact that every spring, whether in a theatre, we'd go out, and I have to say I was generally one other person used to see too, but nobody else used to bother looking at the birds and the flowers and the animals that were, there were always goannas waking up, or snakes, wandering across the road and what have you. And we toured all over Victoria, performing in schools 2 a day. And I was played the lead and drove the van. So, and I have a passion for the Australian flora and fauna. And I was just mortified when I heard about the terrible disaster caused by the fires in Tasmania, and not only burning all those beautiful animals, but the fact that their food, the forests, had been burnt and destroyed, and that an enormous amount of effort was going to have to be put into reforesting that whole area. I had a friend also who was down there, and then he had gone to the mainland to try and find saplings, to plant. And I said, where are you? He rang me. And I said, he said, I'm in Dimboola. I said, well, funny you should say that, because there is an enormous, huge Australian flora nursery in Dimboola. I said, God, you know everything. I said, I travelled all over Victoria, with the Children's Arena Theatre. So he went there, and they didn't have what he wanted, but they knew exactly where he could find it. And he sent, and actually went back and planted an enormous amount too. And I had no money, I had no income apart from the age pension, which I've lived on now for quite a few years. And I thought, what do I have that's of some value that someone might want to buy, that I can send some money down to help? So I thought, how about my silver logie?
Was it emotional for you to let go of a logie?
Sorry?
Was it emotional for you to let go of a logie?
No, I've had it long enough. I've got 2 more. The chap that bought it's very, very generous. He's actually offered to give it back to me.
Oh, wow.
And I said, no, you mustn't do that. I suggest you give it to the Australian Film and Sound Archive. And I rang Miguel there and said, would you be interested? He said, a normal logie, I wouldn't, but that one has a great story. So yes, we would be interested. So that's where it will end up.
Amazing.
You were interviewed by Michael Parkinson, but also you went to dinner with Michael Parkinson. I
did. And the reason I went to dinner with Michael Parkinson was when he interviewed me, there was one particular thing that he he said that he was going to ask me, which was all the things that had happened to Bea while she was in prisoner. It was, you know, totally, when you put them all together, it's just totally ridiculous. No person could ever live through all that nonsense. And so I had in my head put it all together. That's the only thing that he said to me. He told me he was going to tell me. He's not one of those interviewers that says, okay, here are the questions you're going to be asked, which always thinks to me, so my answers aren't going to lead to any questions. And I don't like interviewers who do that. And I've worked for a few, with a few. Anyway, he did. Anyway, and we're getting towards the end of the interview. And I thought, he hasn't asked me that yet, which is a shame because the answer is really good, worthwhile. So I actually led him into it. And he went, oh, yes. And while we're at it, and he came up, and at the end of the interview, he said, you're very good at this. And a lot of people in your profession are not. And he said, and thanks, you old pro, leading me into that question. And I would like to take you to dinner. And I said, oh, I'd love to go to dinner with you. Interesting man. The other interesting thing was when we were chatting before we went to air, quite some time before we went to air, he had seen a cut of me doing Trafford Tansy. And he said, you do the Lancashire accent. You sound like a native. Where did you get that from? And I explained that my grandmother had been born in Cheshire, and she spoke very nicely, but she used to enjoy say, by Gumlove, you can't do that. And, you know, Sally, Prada, and my mother grew up imitating it. So I grew up imitating it, and my daughters can do it as well. And so he lapsed when he was just chatting to me into Broad Yorkshire, and I lapsed into Broad Lancashire, and we were chatting away to each other. And the floor manager came over and said, you're not going to do that in the interview, are you, Parky? He said, why? He said, I can't understand a word she's talking. He said, she speaks it like a native. So when I got to England, I thought maybe they'll give me a go in Coronation Street. But no, love, no. They weren't interested in using Australians on television.
Where did you remember where you went to dinner with Michael? Or
sorry?
Do you remember where you went to dinner with Michael? Was it a restaurant? Or?
It was also with Georgie Best, actually, too. He was there, and some of his friends, two other guys. And but they were down one end of the table, and Michael were up, and I were up the other. And I think it was a Chinese restaurant.
Oh, no.
It was in Sydney.
Wow. Now, before Prisoner, obviously you're on a few other shows. Where did the acting career actually start?
My acting career actually start because I'd worked for 5 years at Children's Arena Theatre.
Okay.
That's a lot of work on stage, live, you know, in playing in the round. And I also not only performed there and was how I first started working at Arena Theatre. Yes, I was doing PR for Melbourne Theatre Company. That's another story. So and they wanted someone to actually I went down there and said, would you like to know where Melbourne Theatre Company is touring with their kids shows? Because I was very angry with MTC. And they said, would you like a job? And I said, doing what? And he said, tour manager. And she said, tour manager. I said, yeah, okay. So I quit MTC and I went down to, actually I didn't quit, I was thrown out. And I went down to, and I became tour manager. And they were doing a thing called the Calico Curtain, which was actually the Canterbury Tales. And after the first day's rehearsal, the woman who was playing the wife of Bath quit. So I ended up playing the wife of Bath and being the tour manager and driving the van as well. And I worked there for 5 years with wonderful people like John O'May when he ended up working there and directing there, because I also used to take all the drama classes at the school holidays, which the kids came on that their parents paid for. I didn't know I was good at that, but I was really good at that. And I loved doing it. And two of the improvisations that came out of those classes in 5 years became shows that we toured with. That developed into shows that we actually toured with. And the beautiful John O'May said to me, Val, we're putting you, because normally you were, the actors were on contract from school term to school term, not the whole year. She said, we're giving you 12-month contracts.
Wow.
But the naughty thing they did to me was I was asked to do some drama classes during the school holidays, but not at the Children's Arena Theatre. They loaned me out. And I was getting my normal wage, which is about $260 a week. And when I got my tax return, they'd loaned me out and charged the people $1,000 a time for my time. But I'd got the thing on the tax. I said, what's this? Devils. So that's what I'm worth, and you better put my salary up. They got more. So that's, so that was a lot of work in theatre, not just directing and designing and writing and performing. That was a pretty good solid ground. And that was then, it was when I left there, and someone who was working, they said, who was a director there, said, Val, I think you need 5 years is enough. And he also cast me in my very first musical, which we did for Festival Theatre Company, which was Applause. And I think I had something like 6 costume changes and 8 musical numbers to sing in my first year. Played the lead in my first ever musical, typical. And so I got out of, I got out of Arena Theatre, and I got an agent, actually, yes. I had an agent already, but she was not brilliant. And somebody who had come to work at Arena Theatre said to me, I think you should go to my agent, which happened to be Philippa Pate, Michael Pate's mother, yes. Wife, and Chris Pate's mother. And that was called Frog Promotions at the time. So I rang them up, and she'd sent everything I'd ever been in, because everything that she, everything that this guy was in, she came to see. And so she saw me as well. And so I rang and said, hello, I would like to speak to you with to view to going on your books. Our books are closed, is what every single acting agent always says. And I went, oh, and she said, what's your name? And I said, my name's Val Lehman. She went, just a minute. And she came and said, could you come at 2 o'clock tomorrow afternoon? And I went in there, and my life changed overnight. And it was Philippa that said, darling, I don't think you should be, I think you need to move on from Arena Theatre. And the first thing we're going to do is send you down to someone who's very, very nice at the ABC to get your equity card and get you some work as an extra, so you can start learning about cameras, which I did. And while the other extras were in the canteen talking about how much they were being paid, I was standing behind a pillar trying to work out what POV was or what eye line was, or could say, could I please have a look at a script? You're an extra, you don't need to see a script, yes, but can I have a look, please? Which was just as well, because the first role, major role, I had a couple of little bits in Homicide, but then I was doing a thing at, I was doing 5 shows a week and another at the in the evening and theatre restaurant, as well as doing 3 shows a day with the Children's Arena Theatre. And I was working with the oh God, what's his name? I've got his book here. Maury Fields and Val in Dimboola Wedding at the Chevron Theatre, Chevron Hotel. So I was doing that at night time, and I was doing the Children's Arena Theatre, and being a mother and cooking and getting kids to school as well, and doing all these performances. And then we were all promised that we'd be given parts in the next show, which was called Goodbye Ted, which was about someone leaving a big football, what do you call it? Football. He used to be a run a football team, best football manager, and he was retiring. And it was called Goodbye Ted. It was his farewell dinner. So it was very similar sort of format to Dimboola, and Maury was in that as well. And we were all promised from Dimbul that we'd all be cast in Goodbye Ted, but the only 3 people that got cast in Goodbye Ted were Murray Fields, Val Lehman and me. And the only reason I got cast in it was because Murray said to the director, "You've got to use that girl, she's going places."
Oh, wow.
And they were very, very sweet to me, very kind. And I've always thanked them for doing that, because it was when I was in that someone from the ABC came along and saw me, and I thought he was trying to pick me up, because I was at that stage I was wearing a mini skirt cut, and my neckline cut down to here, and my boobs pushed up here, and the rest of the cast used to sort of sit around me to stop all these guys trying to pick me up afterwards. And this guy was saying, "I'm a director, a producer at the ABC," and I'm saying, "Oh, really?" And Murray Fields is standing behind me saying, "No, he really is." No, like, I'm going to believe you're the biggest joker in the world, Murray Fields. No way. Anyway, he really was. Because the next day, my agent rang me and said, there's a producer from the ABC who wants to see you about a role. I went, "Oh my God." And I went down there, and I walked into his office. I didn't know where to look. And, oh God, I can't give his name off the top of my head. "Get down, sweetheart." "Yes, no, come in." And he gave me a bit of a script. He said, "Read that for me." So I read it for me. He said, "Yeah, well, I think that's yours." I went, oh. He said, "You don't seem very excited. It's the female lead." I'd never spoken a word on television, ever. I went, he said, "Would you like to know who your leading man is? You'll be playing his wife, John Mellion." I was thrown in at the deep end. I just didn't tell them I didn't know how. I just winged it. And I was fortunate enough, and then they used me again. The ABC used me again. And it was because 3 things that I'd done at the ABC that Kerry Spence had seen me in. And that's how I got Prisoner. Because when I
Just tell the fans for a minute who Kerry Spence is, just for those that don't know.
Kerry Spence was the casting director for Prisoner. And it was a cattle call. 1978, a cattle call, where all the actors go and their minions, and they've got 5 minutes to impress, sit down and chat. And and my agent said, "You'd be ideal for the Gestapo style prison officer." So it tells you a lot about what she thought about me, doesn't it? So off I went I thought I'm going to be speaking about the Gestapo. And I said to Kerry Spence, my agent said this, she said, no. She said, "I think you're Bea Smith material." And I said, "What does she do?" She comes back this afternoon and she reads for the director and the producer and everybody, if she would like to do that for me, please. I got I don't think anybody ever got to read for the Gestapo style prison officer, because I think it had been earmarked for darling Fiona Spence. Anyway, I walked out and I saw all these thousands of people sitting out waiting for their turn for 5 minutes, knowing I was coming back in the afternoon to read for the director and the producer, which I did. And there was darling Graham Arthur was there, and Ian Bradley, and the guy who wrote it. And they asked me to read something, and I read something, and I delivered one of the lines, and I saw them going, and I thought, I've got this.
Remember the line that you had to read?
What?
Do you remember the line that you had to read?
No, I don't. I just remember the reaction. And I thought, I've got this. And then I heard nothing. I heard nothing for ages and ages. And then I was asked to screen test with Collette Mann, in a scene from episode 1, which I did. We both screen tested together. And then I heard from her that she'd been cast. And I went, oh, I've heard nothing. And then finally I got the little note saying, yes, you've got it. I couldn't believe it. And I'm here to tell you, when the first 3 scripts arrived, I remember I was reading them, and I walked down the corridor past my daughter's room. I said, if I don't win awards for this character, I'm not worth my salt as an actress.
Wow.
You did.
And I did.
Just when you mentioned John Mellion being being your leading man, his brother was my best man, and I was Robert's best man as well.
Oh, good Lord. Oh, heavens above. Well, he was very sweet to me. I actually confessed to him that I had no experience at all with television. And he said to me, shut up, it doesn't show.
Very wise
Yeah.
advice.
Yeah, very wise advice.
Do you remember much about the first day of shooting Prisoner? The very first day?
Yes, I do. I remember a lot about the first day of shooting Prisoner. Naughty people I was working with. Yeah, and the very, very first day of shooting Prisoner, there were 2 murder scenes shot. One was Peter Topano upstairs stabbing her husband to death in the shower recess, or was it the bath? I can't remember. And me downstairs shooting my husband on the doorstep. That was the very first day of shooting. And I thought, oh, okay, right, that's right, shooting someone, good luck. You know, I knew a bit about guns. I knew quite a bit about handguns, because my first husband, as I probably told you, was an army officer, and he was also a modern pentathlete. And one of the things you do when you're a modern pentathlete is pistol shooting. So I used to go pistol shooting with him. So I knew how to handle handguns, and I was actually a very good shot. And so I was really interested to see the gun, you see, because the scene was, you know, she knocks on the door, the husband goes in and says, "What, you're not coming in here." No, I just want to give you a present. Open the gun, shoots him at point blank range. So I said, "Can I see the gun?" And they said, no. It's in a little Christmassy looking gift box. And I, no, don't open the box, just do it, and then say, don't take it out yet, on the first, they're sitting up, they're getting the shots. Right. Okay, all right, so I'm doing it. So, okay, next team, take it out, but you mustn't fire it. So I opened it up and I went, what the hell is that crappy looking handgun? I said, I could have got you a better handgun. Never mind, it's not in shot. Don't worry about it. No, they know more than I do. I'm new to this business. All right. So I took it out and they said, just say bang. And they said, bang, and don't fire it. Right, fine. Right, okay, all right. And now, we're all ready to go. Next shot, fire it. So I opened it up. He said, and the dialogue goes, and I don't want to come in. I don't want to go, bang. And I fired it, and a flag saying bang came out. So I turned around and I looked at the crew. I said, oh,
Thank you very much.
I see. That's how we're playing this game, is it? Right. Just so I know. Then they gave me the handgun to use, yes. So I enjoyed it enormously. I thought it was great fun.
Did you do script reading, like together each week? Did you mingle with the other cast?
No. The first time we ever, I think the only time we ever did that was the very first get together of the whole cast. We sat and we read a couple of we read the first episode together with Ian there and the director there and Graham and what have you, and then we were sent off to lunch at the Chinese restaurant together. And that's when Carol Burns said, we need to elect Equity Debt. I nominate Val Lehman. Because she knew someone very well who had worked for Arena Theatre, and I'd been Equity Debt there for 5 years. So I ended up being Equity Debt. Yeah, so no, we didn't get together and read the set, that have a read through at all, but we were given storylines early on, and that's how I kept track of what was the character was supposed to be up to. And it turns out I didn't know. I thought everybody learnt lines as fast as I did. I was extremely fortunate and very gifted in that area. I could literally pick up a script and read it once and know it all. Wow. And I got to the point where I'd be so lazy, I'm ashamed to admit this, that I never even bothered to read the script. I knew what the storyline was. And I had the schedule. I was doing this scene, that scene, that scene. I'd walk on the set and I'd look over Ray Lindsay's shoulder at his desk and go, "What's this scene about?" Okay. And that's be the only time I read it.
And that's on the day of shooting the scene.
No. It was rehearsal day.
Rehearsal.
I never looked at it. I never looked at it again.
Wow.
I was caught out on one occasion because darling Jane Clifton said to me, "Okay, you're stuffed this time, Lehman." And I said, "What?" He said, "You've got a 3-page monologue." I said, "I have not." She said, "Yes, you have." So, oh shit. I went and I grabbed Ray's script and we read it because it was just a rehearsal, and we read it. And I read it. I couldn't believe it. And then okay, they'll just take a rest for a minute while I had a little bit of a chat. And Jane grabbed the script out of my hand and said, "Go on, do it." And I said, "Oh, come on, it's the first time I've ever read it." And she went, "Ha, ha, ha." And she still had it in the hand and she was chatting to someone else. And I thought, I went through it in my head and I went, "Okay, I'll give it a go." I took one prompt.
Wow.
And Jane said to me, "I cannot begin to tell you the number of ways I hate you."
As only she could say.
But it's a gift. You can't teach anyone that. I didn't know I could do it. What was the name of that gorgeous director we had? The girl with legs up to her ears. Juliana Fox. She said that she thought my ability was visual. She thought that I had a photographic memory. And the reason that she thought that, she said, because occasionally you'll say, I can't remember the next word, and it's the third line down, and it was always, she said, either the first line of a sentence or the first word of a sentence or the last word of a sentence. She said, "I think you sometimes miss the edges," but that was only from her observations. And I was not aware of that, but I did know I could pick it up and just know it. Yes. Yep. I can't do it anymore. Unfortunately, that's gone.
Wow. So Bea Smith dominated the first 5 seasons of Prisoner. I mean, yourself.
Did she?
What? You had all the storylines. Did you get treated a little bit differently from other cast members that were wanting more storylines? I mean, you had most of them. Was there any of that ever?
I was never aware of all that. No, that never occurred. I mean, I knew I was doing, I actually at one stage was perfectly aware I was doing more work than most other people. And I tried to get them paid more as a result. And they said no the first time, the second time I won. But that's another story. I was just happy with what I was given. But there were a couple of occasions where I said, "I'm not doing that." There one very big, notable occasion. I read the story and I said, "I absolutely refuse to be involved in that. It's rubbish." And the storyline was a young couple were arrested for shoplifting or something similar. I can't remember what it was. And one of them was a boy, not a girl, but very feminine looking, and was inducted into the prison as a boy without anyone knowing. And I said, "For God's sake, he's on a drug charge. You've been cavity searched, you morons. What are you doing?" No. Okay, we'll change it to shoplifting. Will that make you happy? And I said, "Isn't that interesting? They're interested in making me happy." No, it won't make me happy. I absolutely, flatly refuse to be involved in anything so ridiculous. So you know what they did? They engineered for my character to escape the show. She never saw that storyline. And I went to Sydney to my best friend's wedding at the same time. It turned out to be brilliant timing, which was not deliberate on my part. It crossed my heart and hope to die I wasn't. And I never ever got to have to see that ridiculous person in the prison. But I mean, I had the cheek to say, "No, I won't do it." And I said, why don't they just throw me out? But they didn't. Do you remember that storyline?
Yes, I do. Yes.
Wasn't it rubbish?
Wasn't one of my favourites. Because I, like you, thought this character would soon be found out.
Showering before they come into the prison. And as I said, on a drug charge, they'd be cavity searched. She'd be up there with the leather gloves.
It would have been quite costly for him to shoot up in Sydney, though, wouldn't it? I mean, to move some of those things. Yeah, okay.
No, it was great, as it turned out. And I found it interesting because at that point in time, Collette wasn't in the show anymore regularly.
Yeah.
And she came back in and out. Okay. And so, as I was going to Sydney and her character was supposed to be in Sydney, I did the scenes with her. She was working in a shop. I was, and I beat up somebody while I was there. It was a housekeeper or something. I can't remember who that was. But and we were doing these scenes, and the crew up there, of course, was not our regular crew, said, "I can't believe you two." We said, I said, what's wrong? You muck around and you carry on and you laugh and giggle and you don't even look like you know the scenes. And we say, take, and bang, you do everything in one take. And I said, you got a problem with
that? Did you actually suggest any storylines at any time?
Yes, just one. Yeah. We were asked to come up with some ideas for storylines, and I thought the whole process was terribly interesting because we were asked to also sit in and go into the head office and sit and talk about what we thought our characters could do, what they couldn't do, and what they have done and what they might do. And I found that interesting that a lot of people whose names shall be left out were talking, I think, not about so much about their characters, but often about what they would or would not do. Sheila Florance and I said, do anything, we'll do anything. You name it, we'll do it. You run it down, we'll do it. I couldn't see any, because there's not much that Bea Smith wouldn't have been. Pitch and toss to manslaughter should be in. So, and on that occasion, I said, well, look, we've got a scene coming up where I'm being hit over the head with the chair. I'm in a car accident coming back from Wentworth and banging my head again. Something's got to give. How about amnesia?
Ah, that was yours.
And yeah, and that was my idea. Yeah. And darling Denise Morgan grabbed it. Yes. And it was one of the most interesting things for me to play. Was Bea Smith as she was before she had been institutionalized. It was really interesting exercise for me as an actress. And the other extraordinary thing about it later on, someone else wrote a storyline. During that storyline. Actually, here's a mistake that Denise made, and the directors and the producers, everybody, and even I made when I first read the script, was that she's lost her memory and she goes looking for her daughter, who of course had been dead for years. And she goes to a business college looking for this 18-year-old. And I'd read the script and I thought, yeah. And we're about to shoot it. And I went, this is all wrong. And it wasn't until I was stepped into the character, and I was never aware that I actually did that until that moment. I said, what's wrong? I said, I shouldn't be looking for an 18-year-old. I should be looking for an 8-year-old. I've lost 10 years of my memory. And I went, oh my God, we're out there about to shoot it. And I went, oh, well, we'll cut it. And I said, no, you mustn't cut it. You must rewrite it because it's the only physical image that the audience have that she's lost her, that 10 years of that man. And Denise screamed and yelled and said, no, we'll rewrite it. We've got to put it back in. It's important. So she rewrote it. And it was annoying because my own daughter was playing the role again. And someone accused me, whose name starts with Oscar Valentine, that I did it deliberately so she got a day's work, which was not true.
Okay.
I really, actually, literally did not realize that I should be looking for an 8-year-old until I stepped into the character.
Wow.
So they eventually cast this little, I went to a little infant school and they had this little girl. And I was allowed to choose which one of the little girls was to play my daughter.
You had a lot of fight scenes in Prisoner. Did you ever find
One or two.
One or two. Did you ever find them challenging or confronting when you were doing them?
No, not really. And it was very interesting because I had a fight scene with Carol Burns, I think, very early on when we first started shooting, and they had someone there that was going to be choreographing them, but he didn't know how women fought, and I just said, "Go away! You don't know what you're talking about. We'll do this." And women don't punch. They slap and they kick and they bite and they pull hair. They don't punch. Go away. So she and Carol and I put that together, and from then on, pretty well, I choreographed the fights.
Oh, really?
All the fight scenes I was in, I choreographed. Yeah.
Oh, wow.
And Amanda Muggleton will accuse me of having broken her nose, which is an absolute lie. It's her own fault. Because I had to fight when I kept saying, "Don't put your head down. Don't put your head down. You're going to catch it on my own," which is exactly what she did. And then she said, "Val Lehman broke my nose." And we fight about it all the time to this day. But she's one of my most favorite friends and one of the best actresses I've ever seen work.
Yeah, brilliant.
Did you actually smoke in real life, or were you?
Did I actually smoke in Prisoner? I sure did. Yes, I was a smoker when we started Prisoner. And I actually gave up smoking for 1.5 years whilst I was in Prisoner. And they wrote the cigarettes into my script. And I was very angry about it. And I used to sort of take them out, and then I used to hand them out, as you remember, when I'd finished shooting. And 1.5 years I got, and then I went back at it again. And I always said, "Well, guess if I get lung cancer, guess who I'm suing?" And then I gave up something. I gave up when I turned 50. So that's, 20 odd years ago, 28 years ago.
Wow. I read in the late great Betty Bobbitt's book from the outside that she originally auditioned for the role of Bea Smith.
I didn't know that. Get down, baby.
Yeah. So do you think, had she got it, what part do you think you would have got on Prisoner? Do you think you would have got the part of an officer, or?
I don't know. I have no idea. No. Couldn't have played Sheila's part. No, I probably wouldn't have got cast at all. Maybe later on.
Yeah.
Why didn't they give her the role, I wonder?
Do you think
maybe they're worried about the American accent?
Yeah.
Because she's lovely. She was a lovely actress.
Yes. Do you think that if Carol Burns hadn't left and stayed on, the character of Bea Smith might have gone in a different direction?
You probably would have killed her. No, I don't know. It's really impossible to imagine it, because it didn't happen and it couldn't happen, and it's no point even going there, in my opinion. I do know that Sheila Florance thought the whole show would completely close up and not happen anymore and wouldn't be any good, and I thought, over my dead bloody head. Over my dead body, I mean. And because she was a huge loss. Carol talk about wonderful actresses. She was a wonderful actress in an amazing role. Wow. She's a big loss to the show. Huge.
Did you, I read a lot about leading actors and actresses in a lot of other TV shows. They find it hard to come out of character, when they're finished for the day.
It's a load of crap.
A load of crap. So you never struggled coming out of Bea Smith, no?
No. I mean, although people were threatened with it in a way. I remember being at the Victoria Markets once, talking about something, and this woman came up to me and went, "Oh, it's Bea Smith," and she prodded me and said, "Oh, I told you." And my friend standing next to me said to her, "I really wouldn't do that if I were you." And they said, she pulled away. But the only time I ever used it, and I think you probably heard the story about all those youths threatening me at the subterranean. I've been to the loo in the subterranean section of the railway station at the Fitzroy, at the Flinders Street railway station. No, Spencer Street railway station. I was going to to visit someone up near Sydney, and the train wasn't due for ages. And I went downstairs, and it was a Saturday afternoon, late afternoon, and the young men were coming home. This young group of guys were coming home from the football, obviously. Oh no, it wasn't the toilet, it was the phone booths. That's right. I was going to ring my friend to say I couldn't catch the original train. I had to catch another one, and I rang, and he was not there. And I'd walk past these guys, and they'd go, "Oh, it's Bea Smith from prison." And I just ignored them and got into the phone booth. And when I finished they got into the phone booth either side of me and in front, and there were about 6 of them. And they started going banging, bang, bang on the glass, you see. I was like, "Come on, you smart bitch, how are you tough are you in real life?" And I was instantly a bit frightened and immediately angry. And I pushed the door open really hard, and I walked up to the largest and the most vocal and said, "Sweetheart, sometimes I can be a whole lot tougher." And they just wanted away, and I kept walking. So they believed the character. I mean, what could I have done with 6 years? I couldn't have done any damage. Very little, anyway.
They were scared.
Cowards. Only cowards act like that.
Yeah.
You know,
that was a. This isn't a B. This is a B.
Yeah.
One of those moments.
Mm.
Matt,
Prisoner had many great Prisoner had many great writers. Whenever you got a script and you saw a certain writer's name on the script, did you think, "Oh, this is going to be a good
Denise
script"?
Morgan.
Denise Morgan. Yeah.
Denise Morgan was our greatest writer. She's the one that wrote that 3-page monologue that I had to do too. And if ever, because I remember Barry Pullen saying to me at one stage, you couldn't believe that I had to do a scene where I had to cry. And I've never ever used drops ever in my life. It never occurred to me that if you can't cry, give up acting, girl. And I sort of cried on cue, and he was impressed by that. And I said, "Well, look, it's a Denise Morgan script. Of course, and her writing makes me cry. It does. You know, the emotion is there on the page for me to use. And if she ever wrote a scene where I had to cry, no trouble at all. Never."
Wow.
And I never used drops ever.
Never.
Wow. Collette was very good at that too. She could just cry like at the top of the hat.
How far in advance did you have scripts where storylines were well protected? Where storylines well protected, or did you get scripts pretty early on?
No. They were pretty standard. You used to get them about 3 or 4 weeks ahead, I think. Would be about right.
That much?
Yeah. Usually storylines, not scripts, storylines.
Okay.
And certainly well enough ahead for me to say, "No, I'm not doing that. I'm going to Sydney." for them to organise that. Yeah, I believe once I'd left that changed radically, because I think it was you that said to me, you know, they're getting their storylines 5 minutes before they have to get the script, you know. I mean, I would not have put up with that. I would have stamped my foot big time, because that's not fair to the actors. It just isn't.
How long should they have, do you think?
What?
How long should they have to learn their lines and get the scripts?
Not to learn. No. See, storylines isn't. You don't have the lines on the storylines.
Yep.
You don't get the lines until you get the script. I think that they should have the script 2 weeks before. But storylines, you know, you get a month before.
Yep.
So you knew where you were going.
Yeah.
But I reckon that, you know, my character only had a certain number of words and his, vocabulary, and they used to show, except for Denise Morgan, used to put them together very carefully. But you know, there weren't very many words to learn that she knew. She put in a different order.
I know you just told us about the incident in the phone booth with those youths, but were you recognised a lot in public during the time?
Yes, a great deal.
Yeah.
Early on, very early on, my children would cross the road and go, oh look, isn't that Bea Smith? And I stopped doing that very, very quickly because everybody started going, yeah. No, they didn't enjoy that one bit. No, it was very common that I have to say I was occasionally rather naughty. And I was having lunch with a very dear friend of mine, a friend called Andrew. And he said, bandits at 12 o'clock, bandits at 12 o'clock, someone's approaching, look out. Do what you said you'd love to do. Do it. So this woman comes up to my table, drops a piece of paper and a pen and says, can I have your autograph? No, hi, how are you? I love your work. No, can I have your autograph? I went, my autograph. She said, yeah, give us your autograph, man. And Andrew's kicking me under the table. So I went, oh, okay. Regards, Sally Wilkinson. She didn't even read it. She walks back and says, obviously she said at the table, that's Val Lehman. And they're saying, no. She goes back and went, and they all went, ha, I told you were wrong. You know. As I was leaving, I walked over to her table and I said, I'm terribly sorry about that, but I've always wanted to do it. And then, yes. I know.
Perfect. In episode 9,
rude. I mean, you know, can I have your autograph?
Absolutely.
If she'd asked me nicely and said, hello, Val, I love your work. May I have your autograph? I would have reacted differently.
Yeah, definitely.
But sometimes it's hard to tell the difference between fans and people you know. And I've made the mistake both times on different occasions. At the races, Melbourne Cup once, a young couple that I knew very, very well came up and they had another lady with them. And they said, and we were chatting away. I said, you're terribly rude. You haven't introduced me to your friend. And they said, she's been to your place for dinner twice, Val.
Oops.
Infinitely forgettable, obviously, and I still can't remember her name. And then the other way around, I remember arriving by, what was I doing in Tasmania? I can't remember. Anyway, at the airport, someone came running up to me and said, Val, and I thought it was some relative because my husband's family lived in, I knew a lot of people and they were fans. They weren't sort of close relatives at all. So I've made the mistake both ways. Just to keep the odds even,
In episode 9 of Talking Prisoner, which was our tribute episode to Betty Bobbitt, we spoke to Chris Hill, her son, who told us a little about the famous Val Lehman dinner parties with you and Betty. What can you tell us about them?
Well, yeah, dinner party. Betty was a terrific cook, and we used to like getting together and having dinner parties. But I have to, I won't, this is not about cooking or dinner, but it's about entertaining Betty on one occasion. And you were there, actually. I can't remember, something else was going on that crew weren't invited to, and I didn't go because of it. And I held a party at my place. And I invited, you guys, the crew, came along. And Betty Bobbitt was there as well. She came a bit later and she turned up and she had Oliver with her too, the younger son. And we were playing killer. Do you remember how to play killer? You pick up the short straw and whoever gets the short straw is the killer. And the thing is that you mustn't let anybody know who the killer is. And you have to wink at them to kill them. The person that you chose. If you get winked at by the killer, you have our rule was you had to die spectacularly. And my rule was my house, my rule. You see. So on this occasion, someone was the killer. I don't know who it was, but they winked at Betty Bobbitt just as the door bell rang and opened, and they said, "It's a taxi here for Betty Bobbitt. She's about to go home." So she stood up, dived spectacularly, fully clothed, into the swimming pool, fully dressed, got out, soaking wet, picked up her bag, took I, with my hand, marched up the corridor and got into the taxi soaking wet. She was a fun girl. But she was a terrific cook too, yes.
Yeah, Chris mentioned that. You with the heavy scenes that you
We're probably talking about a dinner party that I had, and Betty was there. And Frank Thring was one of my guests, my dinner guests, which is a huge compliment because Frank didn't go to everyone's house for dinner. I had been to his place for dinner a number of times. This is the only time he ever came to my place for dinner. And I sent all the children away. I said, go out, go and play, go, come back at about, 10 o'clock. And yes, it's all these, my son and my two daughters and Oliver and Chris turned up. And I remember Frank turning around and saying, oh, pictures. But yeah, that was quite a memorable dinner party, that one. I loved Frank. He was a dear friend. I really, and he was terribly, terribly sweet to me. He actually, on one occasion, rang me to invite me to dinner. And I said, I want someone to pretend not to notice if a guest of honor cries or not. And I went, oh God, who's the guest of honor? He said, Michael Redgrave. I mean, he knew this before I was working professionally as an actress. I'd been doing PR for Melbourne Theatre Company. That's how I knew Frank. And he knew I had ambitions to be an actor. And I actually said to him, what is it about, acting? Why? I go to auditions and I'm recalled 3 times. And what is it, that thing? What they don't have it? He looked at me and said, I would have thought you had it. and ultimately he said, I told you so.
Lovely man.
He also on one occasion wrote me a reference to his London agent, which was very sweet of him. Yeah. Nice man. I really, really enjoyed working with him. Oh, should I tell this story? When we were doing Outbreak of Love, I'm going to swear, which was one of the Martin Boyd novels. One of the Boyd novels, not Martin Boyd, one of the Boyds anyway, wrote novels. And it was big production at the ABC. And I was playing the only gross woman in it. Not that all the others were beautiful, well brought up, elegant women, and my character was very much different. Although I actually also supplied everybody with the correct fans, because I used to collect fans, and the fans that Costume had given, I said they're all wrong. They're wrong. Period. I'll give you all Edwardian fans that I own. The only one that got damaged was mine. So I was playing a character called Mrs. Montalban. And we were doing the huge vice-regal governor's ball. And so the whole of the studio, right to the walls was set, and even the crew were in costume. And I overheard Frank saying, Jesus Christ, been here since Sparrow Fart, and all I've done is take shots fucking Val Lehman. And I turned around and I had this very, very long cross right across the ballroom, and very drunk my character was. I had to go up to Rowena Wallace, whose husband was my lover, and to say, tell your husband in future not to wear his socks to bed, was my line. And I said to Frank, I promise I'll get you in shot, next shot. So Oscar Whitbread was directing. So okay, they said, okay, go, take on the take. So I did this very long cross, and Frank was standing on the vice-regal dais, you see, as I walked past. So in all the other rehearsals, I just walked straight past him. But on the take, I paused in front of my pen and went, right in front of him, and then kept walking, and then delivered my line and finished the scene. And there was a pause, and they said, all right, cut. And I heard Oscar Whitbread's voice come down, we're buying that one, Miss Lehman. And I turned around to Frank and said, told you I'll get you in shot. See, I was naughty, not even on the prisoner set, everywhere.
Going back to Prisoner for a minute, between scenes and on day of shooting, did you ever sort of get out of character, or you stayed in character the whole time?
No, never in character once you've finished shooting.
No, but between scenes, you're doing one scene, then you have a break for a little bit, and then go back to another scene, or
No, certainly not. The minute the scripts had words had come out of my mouth, no, Val Lehman again. No. I don't pay any lip service to that nonsense. Staying in the scene, living the role, bullshit. I'm not paid to live the role. I'm paid to act.
Interesting. Did you have any new cast members who joined the Prisoner cast ever come straight to you for advice?
Not generally about scripts, usually about management or contracts. Not usually about the script, but certainly, yes, about contracts and things that had happened on set. And occasionally they did some naughty things. They didn't, very, very, very early on, early scenes in Prisoner, a young girl hangs herself in the cell in a very early scene, and they were going to use someone else's body in a scene later, hanging, rather than pay her for doing the extra scene.
Oh, wow.
And I said, no, you're not, because she came and complained to me. She said, they're going to have somebody else playing me, my body hanging from. So I said, oh, well, no, they're not. So you know what they did? They would have had to pay her extra, because you were paid a certain amount before and or after the third commercial break that made it the second episode. So what they did is they changed the commercial break, so they didn't have to pay her anymore, but at least she got to pay her own body. And those are the sort of tricks that they played on us. They tried. That was very, very early on. I learnt too.
Ken.
I can't imagine why they didn't sack me way before I left. I occasionally say, no, you can't do that.
The iconic scene of putting Lynn Warner's hand in the steam press, always used on TV whenever there is a mention of Prisoner, it would appear. What was it like to film that scene and with Kerry Armstrong?
Well, Kerry's a good actress. I mean, Wonky Warner. It's very violent, But fortunately, the press wasn't hot, and she didn't get burned, and it's only acting. But yes, it's quite violent. I do remember much later on, we were doing a scene, and I suddenly realised I had put my hand on part of the press, which should be very hot. I went and kept delivering my dialogue. At the end of it, cut, and Ray, darling Ray Lindsay came out. Val, are you okay? I went, okay, that press is not hot. But I suddenly realised the bit I was leaning on should be. Oh, God, yes, of course, what you're acting. Oh, easily you forget.
Prisoner had some brilliant extras on the cast. Were there any extras that you thought that deserved like a regular part on the show, on Prisoner?
They were regulars. They were very, very regular. They were named, recognised characters. So I regarded them as extras. And in fact, they very, very early on, as a equity dep, I got a better deal for them, particularly because they were travelling. Actually, I overheard one of them say that getting out to the studio was difficult. And this was very early on. And I thought, I knew what distance you were permitted to travel before you had to be paid extra. And I thought, I wonder how far this studio is from the general GPO. So one day I measured it, and they were about, 1.5 kilometres out. So I went up and said, this is like, week 4 or something. Excuse me, you're not paying us enough. You either have to give us free taxis or petrol allowance, and the extras have to get an extra loading as well. And that's what we got. Betty got taxied everywhere, to and from, and so did Sheila because she didn't drive. And those of us that did, and so did Patsy and Betty and Sheila. Quite a few didn't drive, and I had a car, so I drove. But yeah, that was again fairly early on. This is how to make yourself unpopular with producers.
They kept you on for 5 seasons.
But you see, I had, as I said, spent 5 years as equity dep at Arena Theatre, and the very first television contract I had actually said to my agent, "There's a term here," because I read every word of my contracts, and I still do. I said, "There's a term here I don't understand." And she said, "No, I'm too busy. I'm too busy." And I went, "Oh, too busy. Okay, right, I'll go down to equity and ask them." So I marched down to equity and said, "Please explain." And they said, "Yes, certainly." Well, how did they explain? They sat down, they brought it out, and they explained every role. I was fascinated, and I really absorbed it. And so I understood every contract, and I thought, which is why I thought it's a good idea for me to be equity dep, because that way, and that's also how I got to be the only actor in Australia that got paid for the DVDs, which was not because I know how to read a contract.
Future earnings, yeah.
Sheila Florance started off in a fairly small way.
Someone said to me that she was supposed to be an extra to start with. I was never aware of that, and I don't think that's so, because she was there at the first read-through with everybody, the whole cast. So they wouldn't have done that for an extra.
No, well, I actually had it written down here as an extra, and I just quickly didn't say that.
Oh, very good. Because before we even started shooting, when we went out, she was so naughty out at Wentworth, at Fairley Women's Prison. She was sitting behind me, and we're in the governor's office having a look at a real women's prison, and she's prodding me in the back. "Ask them about the lesbian thing. Ask them about the lesbian thing." So I asked them. I said, "Okay, do you?" I explained to the woman who was the governor there that if you have more than a certain number of people in any group, it's likely that a small percentage of them will be homosexual, lesbian. You see, no, we don't have anything like that here. She said, no, nothing like that occurs. I discovered later that she and the deputy governor were a couple, both ladies, and lived together. Oh. And the social worker standing behind her looked at me and went. So I knew exactly. But Sheila was saying, "No, you asking yourself, you old trout." I loved Sheila, but she could be very naughty.
She had quite a devilish sense of humour.
Wonderful sense of humour. Loved her. Wonderful actress too. Wonderful actress.
We've heard some
good
great.
Well. She loved to entertain people. She'd go in, you'd go to her place, and she'd nail your feet to the floor and force feed you food and alcohol. I loved her.
Sadly, there's some that are no longer with us that you worked with. But what was it like working with Gerda Nicholson, who played Anne Reynolds?
Well, I didn't do a huge amount of work with Gerda because I left. I think before she did, yes. But she was a beautiful woman, gorgeous woman, and a completely different sort of governor. Yeah. Which was good. I mean, it was nice. It keeps things fresh. Yeah, but a lovely lady, a real lady. But I didn't actually spend a lot of time with her socially.
I actually spent a few lunch times in the studio when she would come in, and she would be involved in. We never. I'd be studying or writing or reading or whatever, and she would launch into her Tai Chi sort of routine. And, and we just had this tacit agreement that we didn't speak. She just did her thing, I did my thing. That was lovely.
I knew that she was very yes, into all that sort of thing. Fantastic. I'm totally undisciplined.
But your workload increased as you were involved in all the storylines from season 1 to season 5. Did it ever get over the top? Did it overwhelm you at all?
No, it didn't. It's just my job, and I really enjoyed it, and I thought I was damn lucky to have it. So I just did it. I didn't find it overwhelming. Things annoyed me here and there, and when they annoyed me, I did something about them. Not only, most of the things that annoyed me came from management, sometimes from Channel 10 management. Do you remember, you may not have been there because it was a rehearsal day. We were rehearsing and it was middle of winter and it was freezing cold. And we were in the studio and I said, why haven't they got the heating on? And the excuse was that that lighting bar used to warm up, and then when we were shooting the next day, it would crackle. And that's the reason why it wasn't on. So we're all sitting there and we're taking the blankets off the beds on the set to keep warm. And I said, no, I've had this. So, because I'd been up to ops and said, can you turn the thing? And they said, no. And so I had this. So I said to one of our girls, with a Polaroid camera, can I borrow your camera, please? And I took a photograph of all these actresses with the blankets around them. And I went marching up to the head office at Channel 10, straight past the secretary, slapped them on the head honcho, whose name I do not remember, desk, and said, that's your copy. The next one goes to TV Week. 5 minutes later, the heating was turned on.
They used to keep it cold on shooting days because of the heat out of the lights on the set. But of course, when you were outside of the set, it was quite cool. But on days of rehearsals, without, the big lights on, it got freezing. And I think it was just a case
of freezing.
Yeah, no, I think it was just a case
of one of the best rating television shows in Australia, and this is what the cast is having to put up with. No, they turned the heating back on.
Yeah.
How many hours a week did you work on Prisoner?
How many hours a week?
Yeah. Can you remember? I
commonly worked 15 hours a day.
Wow.
Not every day, but very often.
That's a long day.
And if I had, because occasionally, every now and then, because I was in so many storylines, I'd be there at 4 o'clock in the morning to do OBs and then end up in studio until 9:30 at night.
Wow.
Now, you tell English actors and American actors that, and they think you're lying. I think my record for shooting scenes in one day was 21 scenes.
21.
21 scenes.
Wow.
I worked hard. That's why I didn't mind telling effing Grundies where to get off. I was working hard.
Was that, did that take a lot of toll of your family?
They never saw me. They were thrilled to pieces. I had teenage girls. Mother was never home. You. And my son was at boarding school. No, they didn't mind. They got into all kinds of mischief. Actually, Cassie, during later years, she was 4 years at photographic college. Yeah, she now has a master's degree in visual arts. And Joanne was doing sewing and all kinds of things, and then she went to and did dramaturg at Victorian College of the Arts. Because I had said to her, I think that's what you should do. She wasn't interested in being an actor. I said, but you do really well on crew. You'd be really well, good. And so she said, I said, put your name down for Victorian College of the Arts. You'll get in. She said, well, why? Because you're my mother. And I said, if you feel that way about it, darling, change your name, because I'm not changing mine. She did extremely well. And she ended up, they got her to actually stage manage their operas and things, and paid her as a student. Wow. Yeah, she was very, and I knew she would, because I knew she was going to end up in the theatre, because she just wanted to be there. She even if she had to sweep the floor. So I just knew that that's where she was going to end up. She's not doing it anymore, unfortunately. She was a very, very, very good stage manager, but she has an autistic, my grandson, one of my grandsons is autistic, and I'm afraid that's taken a lot of her energy and a lot of her time has had to be directed there, and she's very good at that as well.
Fantastic. In episode 4 of Talking Prisoner, we interviewed Ian Bradley. What was it like working with Ian?
I loved Ian. He was our best producer by miles and miles and miles. He understood the show. He valued the show. He also cast me. Because I know that I was not, nobody knew me when it came to casting. I was just very lucky. Yep. Nobody knew me.
Yeah. He was great.
Ian actually told me that he was that they were worried about me because of my lack of experience with cameras. But he said that my audition was just knockout, my screen test, so they just couldn't not look at me. I thought, well, good, because I mean it was the greatest thing that's ever been handed to me. I was very, very fortunate.
Yeah. Did you find that playing Bea Smith for that long, did it open or close many doors? And what I mean by closing doors is that could producers overlook Bea Smith? Yeah.
Yeah. I'm afraid, yes, a lot. That's one of the reasons why I went to England.
Okay.
To sort of in an attempt to escape that. But then they wouldn't use me on screen. So, but I did 7 years very successfully on stage, doing some wonderful stuff. Driving Miss Daisy, Misery. I did the production. I toured the production. They did it Misery in the West End, and it got very lukewarm response. Then I did the tour and knocked them out. The sort of critiques that you would write for yourself if you were cheeky enough. Really, really, the very scary Miss Lehman had me scared to death. And she's so much better actress than she seemed to be in Prisoner and things like this. They really raved about me. I tried very hard when I got back to Australia to get a production off the ground here, and nobody was interested. And it had never been done here, and it still hasn't been.
Wow. How sad.
Great shame, because it's no. It's not an expensive production. It's one set and 2 people. But it's a real workout for 2 actors. It really is. It's a great role.
Yeah, definitely.
Can you tell us how it came about that you left Prisoner and why and how you felt about it?
I'd had Grundy's up to Pussy's Bow. I really had. And in that, though, actually, it's mostly because of one director who actually became a producer, and he made me very angry a lot of the time. And his name starts with John McRae, and. And I also heard there was a directive out. Another one of our directors told me that there was a director out saying that they were trying to get something on me to sack me. And I was driving them mad because I always knew my lines. I was always on time and I always did my job. And I thought, then what the hell do they want? And why am I spending time with these people if that's what they think? And so I said to my agent, find me something else, because this is just making me feel unloved. And that's why I left.
What was the public reaction like at the time with Bea?
No idea, couldn't care less. Wouldn't want to know. I tell you what, the press reaction was, it hit the second page of every newspaper in Australia that I'd left the show. Wow. I thought, what a wank. And I was asked to go back 3 times.
3 times.
And the 3rd time I said to my agent, look, all I understand is money. So this was early December. And I said, okay, I want this amount per episode. and I want $1,000 a week retainer between now and February when they start shooting. They said yes to the huge amount of money I asked, but no to the retainer. And I said, no, I won't do it. And they never asked me again, but that was the third time they'd asked. I had been told by one of the publicists, not gorgeous, oh God, no, I can't think of her name. One of the publicists was a great friend of mine, but this was a later one. And she'd said to me, I could be replaced overnight. And I said, well, good luck. And my agent was laughing like a drain when she rang me and said, they're asking me to go back. And I said, tell them to stick it. I don't want to work for those people.
Wow.
I think now, what was I doing? I walked, because, I was being paid a lot of money by that time. I'd pushed them pretty high.
Yeah.
In fact, the last contract deal that I had with them, as it shows you what a naughty girl I can be, I said to my agent, look, they pulled a filthy trick on us last time, by the way. It's too difficult to explain exactly why, but what it ended up meaning was that I didn't get a raise and everybody else did, basically, because of the 4-episode thing, which Ken would probably understand. You got paid more for the 4th episode, and it's very, very complicated. But actually, and I was doing more 4 episodes than anybody else, and all of a sudden, nobody was allowed to do 4 episodes.
Oh.
They had to put the because we're doing 4 episodes a week. You understand, by contract. That was what the contract is, but it was only actually 2 hours airtime. But it's because episodes were in those days divided up into half hours contractually. Mm-hmm. So I was doing more work than most, and they had this contract, and it was Mr. McRae who did it, and it meant that nobody was to do 4 eps anymore, and everybody. So everyone got a raise. I didn't get it, which meant that they got up to what I was being paid, but then nobody got any more. And I thought, what a stinking, filthy trick. So the next contract deal came up, and I said to my agent, this is what I want. I want this, and I want that, and and I want a guarantee of 4 episodes at this amount. And I'm not going to take no for an answer. And my battery's running very low. And so hang on. I'm going to plug you in. And my agent said, okay. And she went for it. And she got in touch with me and said, no, Val, I'm sorry. They've said no. And I don't want to upset them because I have to look after a lot of other people on the cast. And I absolutely 100% understood that. So I thought, fine. So I said, well, I'm going out on my own. So I marched up to the general manager's office at Channel 10, the studio, knocked on his door and said, hi, have a little chat. And said, this was Wednesday. I said, I'm just paying you the courtesy of telling you I'm leaving the show on Friday. And he went, sit down, Val. What do you mean? I said, my contract is up on Friday and they won't negotiate with me. And he said, what are you asking for? And I told him exactly what I was asking for. And he said to me, that is so far from outrageous. He said, now, sit tight, because what you don't know is Channel 10's contract with Grundy's is up on Friday too.
Wow.
And I am going to say, no Bea Smith, no prisoner. So I just went back into the studio and said nothing and watched Mr. McRae stew. And I won. Now, I also went back to the cast because I'm equity deaf, and I said, now look here, you know, it's open. I've set a precedent again. You've always ignored the first one I set, and that's, you know, never mind. Because I refused to sign the contract, which say that they have rights to everything indefinitely. I said, no, you don't. I crossed that, which is why I got all the future developments They covered all future developments. And I said, no, you cannot possibly give away something that doesn't exist yet. And I crossed that particular line out of my contract, and I advised every other member to do so because they had accepted it from on my contract, which meant I had set the precedent. But everybody ignored me totally. And that is why I'm the only actor in Australia, in the world, that gets paid for the DVDs.
Wow.
So anyway, as I said, he'd said that, no actor, no prisoner. And where was I going? No Bea Smith, no prisoner. And I told the cast to also, hang out and go for something bigger, and they didn't. And this is against. I loved Sheila. You have to understand. I loved her. I loved her like mad. But we were doing it's a funny story, so I'm telling you. We were doing a corridor scene, and it was 6 extras and Sheila and me. And I was talking about, because they were about to do, the same with the contracts. And I said, you really ought to look into this and be careful. And Sheila was being very naughty that day. And she said, yes, we know that you've done this because you're the star. And you did this. And she called me star once. She called me star 6 times in the one sentence. And I thought, you naughty old trout. So I turned around to her and said, that's right, Sheila, I'm a star. Great big fucking star. As a matter of fact, I am such a big star. I'm thinking of giving lessons. Do you want one? She never called me star again. Sorry about swearing, but that's what I said.
That's funny. Shall we do a take 2 tomorrow, or
I don't mind.
is that okay? I'll
This is not about me having a drink at 6 o'clock.
no, because it is 20 past 5. Is because we've sort of we're over half, but there's still a bit to go, and I don't want to interrupt into people's dinners time. I'm happy to send you a bit.
No, I don't mind doing tomorrow if you want to. Yeah, sure.
We can cut from here into this tomorrow. Does that work?
Are you sure, Val?
Yeah. What's tomorrow? What day of the week is it?
Tuesday. Tomorrow.
No, I haven't got anything on.
Well, thank you so much for your time.
Yeah,
And
really.
it's
not at all.
fantastic.
Thank you for being interested.
Well, thanks again, Val.
Yeah.
Tomorrow then, we have a date at 11 o'clock.
11 o'clock, yes, certainly.
Okay.
Yeah, okay.
Thanks so
Bye.
much. I'll really appreciate it.